How's everyone doing? I'm Bryce, KD9YEY from Bloomington, Indiana. Is this an alright distance? Everybody can hear me okay? Okay, great. So tonight I'm going to talk about backpacking and ham radio. Does anybody have any experience with this? Okay, excellent. So this may be a little redundant for some of you, but it's always fun to just talk about it and kind of get other people's perspectives on it. For those of you who have not done any backpacking, this hopefully will be very informative. So backpacking and portable radio. All right, so what is portable radio? Obviously we have a bunch of different types of radio. If there's one thing I've learned about this hobby is that as soon as you dive into one thing, it just keeps getting wider and wider and wider. There's still things I'm learning that we can do, which just makes ham radio a really incredible hobby. So we have our base stations, of course. They're nice, warm, cozy places at home that we set up and operate our radio from. We have remote base stations, so we're setting up kind of like our field day, where these are very impressive stations, but we've set them up maybe in a comfortable spot, big antennas. Deployable stations, I kind of consider this kind of what the military does, maybe regional contacts that you can set up. Vehicle stations, of course, with our mobile stations and our cars. And then you get into this territory of backpackable stations. So this is something that, and we'll get into a little bit more here later in the presentation, that goes from something I can set up to do that's a little bit heavier all the way down to ideally less than a pound. Man pack, which I have no experience with, but I know it exists, and then of course our HTs. Handy talkie for those of you who aren't familiar with that term. All right, so I'll give you some backstory about myself. That's me as a very youngster there in Civil Air Patrol. Anybody familiar with Civil Air Patrol? I know we have at least one senior member here tonight. So I started in Civil Air Patrol at 12 years old. I knew nothing about the military, but my mother, I believe, saw an ad in the paper and was like, is this something you want to try? Of course, I was down to give it a shot, and I loved it. This picture here is actually an elper, if you're familiar with that term. So if a plane crashes, they have something that goes off and emits a signal. That's how we find them. So this is essentially a directional antenna, which helps us find the downed aircraft. So this was at the National Emergency Services Academy. I was actually instructing these other two cadets on how to use an elper. So through Civil Air Patrol, I discovered the love of camping, search and rescue, and just being in the woods in general. It's definitely a good opportunity if you have any children or if you want to get involved with it. I definitely recommend Civil Air Patrol as a path. Later, I did join the Army. So Civil Air Patrol is the auxiliary of the Air Force. Why I went Army, I don't know. I think they were just the first door on the right when I went into the recruiter's office. They got me, so. No regrets, though. I definitely enjoyed my service time. But I got out after my term, and then I had what I like to call my wild years. So my mother over here is actually with us tonight, and she's laughing because I think those were her trauma years for her. So. Definitely lived out of my car for a bit, traveled the country, saw a lot of amazing things, and again, no regrets there. So that's a little bit of backstory as about 10 years ago. So where did we get to ham radio? How did I get started in that? So Thunderstruck, another hobby that I do is high power model rocketry through the National Association of Rocketry. So in 2022, there's a club up near Lafayette, Indiana Rocketry Incorporated, who held an event called Thunderstruck. So this is a national level rocketry event. It's very fun. You see some really impressive rockets go up. I mean, we're talking miles high into the sky, so excellent stuff. My stepdad and I, Joe Ladwig there, W9NBY, were at this event, and we were at a hotel, and I remember us both sitting there, and he's over there messing with this radio thing, and I asked him, I was like, okay, so what is ham radio about? Fast forward to me giving a presentation tonight about ham radio. I immediately was interested in the hobby. He told me about hamstudy.org, another excellent resource if you're not familiar, and I started looking at my technician license. So I was doing all the study, getting everything ready for that. I did get my technician license, I believe, by the end of that year. I'm pretty sure it was pretty quick. And then before I got my general license, I actually participated with you fine folks at Field Day in 2023. So this is up near Mooresville, where you set up on the hill. I can't remember the name of the site, but what an experience. What is it?
Victor Conservation Club.
There it is, Victor Conservation Club. And compliments to the chef, I add. Excellent job. What an experience, especially for someone who was not even a general yet. to have their first experience with high frequency be a field day event at the caliber at which you throw it. I mean, this was incredible. So I had gotten on my HT and done the welcome net in our county, which is an excellent thing, but I'd never done anything with high frequency. So I remember, I think the highlight for me that weekend was, it had to be 2:30 in the morning. I'm on the GOTA station, which we were just killing it, by the way. It was a great year. And I contacted New Zealand. Now I remember Ken was sitting behind me, and I think he was about half asleep, but that man jumped up and was real excited to hear New Zealand come on the line, and that's kind of what keyed it in for me. I'm like, wow, this is really neat. You can literally talk to anyone anywhere on the planet given the right conditions. It was really cool. So I continued to study and worked and got my general license. I am still a general. It is my goal before the year's out to be an extra. But as you'll see later in the presentation, there's some things that might have delayed that a bit. But it's gonna happen, I promise. Later, I discovered portable radio. So this is when it kind of occurred to me that, man, I can really apply this hobby to basically everything else that I love to do, which is really cool. And we'll talk more about that as well. So we have parks on the air. We have summits on the air. We have a new one, MOTA, motorcycles on the air. That's my thing. And any other out I can get my hands on. So I've been using ham radio basically anytime I go outside. I'm like, is there a park nearby? Is there something that I can bring out there and pack with me? You know, this has led me on a journey of seeing how small and lightweight I can get my equipment to be able to take it with me. That's us on the GOTA station, by the way. Excellent. I think that was also 3 in the morning, and you can see Joe's very tired there. All right, love this picture. All right, I was a little more background, so school, carpentry, and beyond. My school career has been kind of winding. I left the military and had my wild years, then started getting my associates. So I was working on that for a while. Took a break to work for a couple years, went back and finished, and then started on my bachelor's. Come 2019, my GI Bill ran out. So what am I to do? Either go into debt or go to work. So I went to work, and I was actually a carpenter from 2019 all the way through 2023. I just love this picture because that dog would not leave the site. He kept sitting under where I'm trying to cut. So I picked him up and I was walking away, and somebody asked me a question. So I was like answering the question, and my friend took this picture, but it's just great. We call it Bassets and Biceps. It's just, if you want the calendar, come see me after. All right, so after 2023, I returned to school and I graduated. So I've now got my bachelor's, which is great. And in kind of a weird winding path, I've ended up at the health department working in emergency preparedness. So I distinctly remember sitting in one of my classes thinking like, man, I really love radio. How could I apply this to a work, to a job? One of my professors was the health administrator in Monroe County, and I asked her about an internship opportunity. She told me that there was an assistant position available in public health emergency preparedness. I sought that out. I got the internship position. I actually got hired as the assistant. And then a few months later, I'm actually now the coordinator. I also just interviewed to become the director of emergency preparedness, but I haven't got that job yet. I'll let you know. But wish me luck. So I'm already working in emergency preparedness. I work with radio somewhat. It's kind of applicable, but it's definitely something that I really love to do. So this kind of a winding journey here has led to great places, and I'm very happy to be here. So how did I get back to the woods? I know that's what we're here to talk about. So since 2023, these are just some of the milestone hikes that I've done. I've done a lot more than this, but I was starting out, getting back into it, like let's do a 10-mile peninsula trail hike. These are all, for the most part, in Monroe County, with a few exceptions there. The ones I want to point out, the 3, Tecumseh Trail, which is 48 miles long, the Knobstone Trail, which is 58, and then the Adventure Hiking Trail, which is 25 miles. That's, if you do all 3, that's called the Triple Crown of Indiana. I've completed all those within a year. And actually the Knobstone Trail, which is, people walk on it to train for the Appalachian Trail, it's very difficult. And I did that in December, so 2 Decembers ago, and it took me 3 days. Later in this last May, I did 90 miles of the 160 version of the Knobstone Trail, which connects the Tecumseh and the Knobstone together. I have many more on my radar, lots of stuff coming up, but this is kind of like my dipping my toe, I guess, kind of back into the world of entering the woods. So let's talk a little bit about what types of hikes there are, because it's not all 90 miles in the woods for a week, you know. We have your day hikes, which is anything from pulling up to a nature preserve and doing a quick walkabout to all day. Maybe you can do 20 miles a day, maybe 10, whatever. Weekend hike might involve a couple overnights. I think on average, nationally, the longest hike is a single overnight. Like that's just because of the way time is and we live our lives, we all have jobs, so it makes sense. I would consider backpacking trips anything over 3 nights. I think that's kind of when you get into that mindset there. Then you have section hikes and through hikes. So a section hike is a part of what's called a through hike. Through hike it's not really hard to find, but it's anything, in my opinion, over 90 miles. And then a section hike would be any portion of that you choose to do. So an excellent example of a through hike is the Appalachian Trail. So this was a goal of mine for this year. I was going to start on this on April 28th of 2025. There's a couple reasons why that's changed, which we'll talk about in a minute. But some fun facts about the Appalachian Trail is it's Georgia to Maine through 14 states. It's about 2,200 miles long. It's the equivalent of going from sea level to Mount Everest over 16 times. It takes about 165 days on average to complete. And to through hike it, you burn about 5,500 calories a day just to maintain body weight. So really it's an eating competition, the whole length. Or a good excuse to pig out. So the Appalachian Trail was a goal, like I mentioned, but life finds a way. And there were 3 major events that kind of interrupted my goal to get on the trail. First was this new job, of which I've already told you. Second is I have a kid coming mid-May. It's my wife over there. She's pregnant. Thank you. It's our first, and did not expect that necessarily, so can't go walk in the woods for 6 months with a newborn, right? And then, of course, we all know about Hurricane Helene, which, if you were not aware, wiped out about 1/3 of the Appalachian Trail. So it's not gone forever. We will rebuild. It's what we do as humans. But for now, it is not very hikeable in this moment. So my new goal for the Appalachian Trail is to section hike it. So this does not have to be any set amount of time. There's people who've completed their through hike by section hiking in their 50s when they started in their 20s. It's really, as long as you hike the 2,200 miles, you're considered a through hiker of the Appalachian Trail. It does not have to happen all at one time. I mentioned the wisdom of experience because I think 9 out of 10 through hikers that I've spoken to say don't through hike it, section hike it. You get more memories rather than one just terrible memory, right? And you get more chances to get out in nature. And every year is different. You got a different bunch of people. It's really something special. So it is still a goal of mine to make that happen someday. Mentioned the recovery efforts. We're going to get there. It's already underway. The trail's being rebuilt and will continue to be improved. So in ham radio, we have a favorite term. It depends, right? So what gear do I need? Well, it depends. So let's talk about it. If you're in your car, you're doing parks on the air, you can kind of have whatever you want. I say all the options. Weight is less of a factor. You're not carrying it on your back. There's some things you have to consider, like if you can't get it out the door. Also, if you need to set up and tear down in any quick manner, it might have a factor. Weight might have a factor there. But you can have all the comfort. So I like this picture because, yes, we hiked about 20 feet to get to the spot, but we were in a car. And we brought the tables, we brought the chairs. It was very comfortable. It was great. Another important thing is you can bring your backups. You hike 20 miles into the woods to set up a new radio and you don't have your coax. That's a problem. So in car, if you have the space, put all the redundancies in there. You just might as well do it. Just be prepared, be ready. So a good example of a car setup would be a 100-watt radio of your choice. A mast, because not every place allows you to use trees, or sometimes it's just better not to. Bring your antenna, your tables, your chairs, your computer, battery, coffee, cold soda, whatever you want. So your day hike. So the route that you choose is kind of going to dictate what you bring on your day hike. So you can kind of see it blends in a little bit, but this backpack here, this is a 25-liter backpack. It's kind of my go-to for just a day outing. I can do anything from 5 miles up to 20 with it pretty comfortably. So knowing your route, knowing what you need to bring, is going to be an important part of knowing what to pack. So, and your ability, of course. So if you're going to do a route that involves a bunch of up and down, you might want to bring a pack with a good waist belt, because that weight should be carried on your hips, not necessarily on your shoulders. So pack choice is very important. I always like to recommend a 30-liter pack. I think it's a good all-around pack option. And some are better than others, so it's important to read reviews, do your research. And then always make sure that you bring the 10 essentials, which we'll look at in a moment. I like to bring a QRP-ish radio. I think they tend to be a little bit lighter. I know there are certainly, especially today, some 100-watt options that are very light, but they're also, some of them, over $1,000, and that's not necessarily my budget, especially with a new kid coming. So I like to make sure I bring something that can do all the modes that I want to that day, but is still somewhat light. I do like to have a mast and a throw line with me when I'm doing hikes, because if I can avoid going into trees, I do. I think it's just easier if park ranger comes by. I always like to mention that we are a leave no trace hobby, or at least we should be. And I think that using that term, especially with park rangers, that phrase, is something that's going to go over very well with them, because that's what they like to hear. So even if I do have a line going up in the tree, you can just show them exactly what you're doing. Just leave no trace hobby, and just in general, be a good ambassador of ham radio. And then you bring your antenna. So the easiest way to do this is to bring a resonant antenna where you would not need a tuner or have a tuner built into your radio. So the 10 hiking essentials. So pretty much anytime you're going to go into the woods, anytime you're going to go outside, away from the comforts of home, you should at least have these items with you. So the beauty of this is a lot of these can pair up as double things. You can also use some of these as in your radio setup as well. Like your emergency shelter could become where you sit on the ground and not get dirty, you know. So there's options there. Okay, so we've talked about day hikes. Now we're going to talk about weekend hikes all the way through to backpacking trips. So I've kind of broken this into two categories of distance. So weight is everything. When I first started getting back into the woods, November 2023, I was carrying a 47-pound pack. Now, if you've carried 47 pounds on your back, it's not so bad when you're just going to your car. But 15 miles later, 2 miles later, 20 feet later, it feels extremely painful. Not a good call. I was bringing everything. I was able to dwindle that down by May of last year when I did the 90-mile hike to 30 pounds. Definitely better. But at this point, I've gotten it down to between 20 and 25 with food and water included. And that takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of sacrifice of giving up comfort items and such to be able to get to that level, which we'll talk about more. So there's techniques to cut weight. A good phrase that I like to use is don't pack your fears. You know, if I think that I need 2 coats because I'm scared it's going to get cold, in reality, I know that I can get by with a light set of polypros from the Army days and a single coat and just get in my sleeping bag, right? So you have to kind of gauge your experience with the elements that you're going to be facing and then choose what you're going to use. Choosing lighter gear. This isn't always easy because typically there's a dollar sign attached to lighter gear, right? So there are ways to navigate that field and not necessarily break the bank and still get lighter gear. Take less stuff. That's always an option. You don't necessarily need the hardback volume of whatever book you're reading, you know, maybe a lightweight Kindle, or maybe just hike until you're tired enough that you don't want to read, you know. These are options. Your comfort items. So this could be, everyone has a different thing that they say, I cannot leave home without this. For some people, it's coffee. For some people, it's a pillow, or their harmonica, or whatever you need to do. For me, as you'll see later, I do a YouTube channel, which I'll show you all in a bit. I have some cards to give you. And it's sometimes difficult to choose whether this trip is focused on making a video or am I here to do radio, because I want to do both. So for anything at this distance, I kind of have to really decide what's the focus. So that's why I said filming or radio. But I've gotten to the point where I can do both, and we'll talk about that. So you need to start paring down. It's a learning curve, like I mentioned. Dollar signs involved and experiences involved. The best way to know is to go. You got to get out into the woods. You got to test your equipment, even if it's just a day, you know. And you don't have to go way out in the middle of nowhere. You can walk down the street. Just put the gear on, see how it feels. And then imagine yourself going up and down mountains. And, you know, imagine how bad that would be. So you can bring everything but the kitchen sink. But comfort items, you really have to choose what is that one thing. And I would recommend sticking to one thing, because we want to bring it all, but you just can't. An excellent hack, I guess, would be to learn how to use things in multiple ways. So I would have my towel be the same thing that I wash the dishes with, be the same thing that I wear over my head if it gets too sunny. I don't need a hat and that, I already have one thing, right? So just kind of learning what can be used in multiple ways is important. And then, again, just don't pack your fears. So what have I dwindled down to backpacking? So this is just backpacking equipment. I really like this picture because I told AI to give me ham radio in the woods, and it gave me that. Had to keep it. Yes, sir.
What do you got water? 6.5 pounds per gallon. I've hiked dry trails where there's no water.
Yep. Excellent question. So the Knobstone Trail specifically has basically no water on it. So there are ways, for that one, because it was also in December, I put water caches along the trail. I had 2 for 3 days, so I refilled twice. I only carry 2 liters of water on me at a time. But for trails that do have water, I have filters. So you can put on, you can drink right out of the puddle. Life Straw is a brand, Sawyer is another brand that I use. So I gather water on the way. It's not always the prettiest water, but it'll get by. I've never had an issue, and I've drinking a lot of water with toads sitting in it and stuff. So. But the equipment that I tend to use, and I've figured out that this is all I really need, is my backpack, my tent, my sleep system, which is my bag, my pad, and yes, I do bring a pillow. My clothes, which is 1 pair. Yes, that's disgusting, I agree, but it's true. Through hikers carry 1 pair of clothes, that's what they wear. Maybe 2 pairs of underwear, 2 pairs of socks, but they're wearing the same clothes every day for 6 months when they're hiking the Appalachian Trail. It's just the reality. It's gross, but it's what you gotta do to get through. Your cook system, so a lot of people do what's called cold soaking. So that's where you prep your food in any jar. We call them talenti jars. It's just that like a screw plastic jar essentially. And you put water in there, and it slowly cooks it, not with heat, but moistens it enough you can eat it in the evening. It's not delicious, but it gets you through. I do, depending on the length of the hike, I'll bring a little canister and a little butane stovetop because I do like hot coffee in the morning. You got to bring your food, your water, which is your bottles and filter, and then your shoes, first aid kit, flashlight, which I always just use a headlamp, and then your tracking poles. I used to laugh, and this is not me judging them, but I used to laugh wondering, why would I ever need to carry these sticks with me when I'm just walking? Then I put on the pack and I started walking some of these hills. It is a game changer. If you don't use tracking poles, you should. It's wonderful. So what radio equipment do I use on these hikes? So it's kind of been an evolution in weight, like I mentioned. I've started with certain things and then dwindled it down into others. So I use this IGG90 because it's what I could afford when I became a general. I love this radio. There's a huge following. It's a great radio. It'll tune anything, and it's got a built-in tuner. It's not extremely heavy. It's excellent. The first antenna that I bought was the Soda Beams Band Hopper 3. It does 20, 30, and 40, but you have to disconnect and reconnect these alligator clips to be able to swap bands. It's fine. It's a little bit on the heavy side for what I have now, but it was an excellent choice at the time. My mast, I had a mast from Soda Beams as well, which was about 7 pounds, which a thru hiker's cutting the handle off of their toothbrush to save a couple grams, so a 7-pound mast is just not really feasible for that distance. I've kind of switched into 20-meter infed half waves, then the band hopper, because they're lighter, a little more versatile. I can do multiple bands on them without having to switch it to alligator clips. I now have a QRP Labs QMX. That is the lightest radio I own. It does CW and digital, but it is an excellent choice. Batteries, I started out with I believe a 12 amp hour Bio-NO, which is a little on the heavy side. I've gotten it down to 6 amp hour, and now with the QMX, I just use one of those Talent Cells 12 volt rechargeables. It's so light, it's the exact same size, it's perfect. The antenna I choose now to carry is one of 2. I have a pack antenna, which is the lightest antenna out there, and it just performs amazingly. It's always done great. I also have the 40-meter extension for it, as well as the Reliance antenna, which I tried out, and those work great too. And then if you're going to do CW, you need a little Morse key, and CW Morse has extremely light ones. You know, you don't have to go super crazy there. And there's 3D printable ones. I think K6ARK Adam makes that. I don't have the file, I don't have a printer anymore, but they seem to be great. So when you're deciding what radio you need to carry, we need to think about what modes we want to work. So this is my opinion, but single sideband, a little more weight, a little bit less distance. It takes some more power to punch through sometimes, right? Digital, a little bit more equipment depending on how you're doing it. Less fun maybe. I'm pausing for ridicule from you digital fans. Okay. It's fine. It gets you through in a pinch. I like digital when I'm at home and stuff, but if I'm out in the woods, there's just something about getting on that radio and actually talking to people in Africa when I'm in the middle of the woods at 2 a.m. in the morning. It's just so much fun. And then CW. So this is kind of the optimal setup for distance and the power that you need. So it's the most efficient form of radio for backpacking. Steep learning curve though. That's a whole other language you gotta learn. I'm working on it. I can now hunt people because I know their call sign ahead of time. I have not activated yet, but it's coming. The goal is this year. So if we're looking at distance, we have the 2 to 4 days. So this would kind of be the setup that I would use for this length of time. Because I know I'm not hiking for a week, I don't mind carrying my little bit extra heavy Zyju 90. I have my POTA 20 mask, which is from Gigaparts. This is the lightest option that I'm aware of. It's compact, it fits everything, and it works really well. The only complaint I would have, it's a little bit flimsy. It's hard to hold a lot of weight, so I'd put the end, not your feed point, on it. Otherwise, it's going to start buckling over. But in a pinch, it works great. I do carry my throw line. I do not carry one of the bean bags with me because that's just unnecessary weight. There's plenty of sticks that you can use and get over there. The RG316 coax seems to be the best choice as far as weight. It is low loss. It's not quite as efficient as some of the other stuff out there, but it's tiny and it works really well for my purposes. Like I mentioned, the Pac-10 is kind of my go-to of choice now. And then a Bio-Inno battery, and of course my paper log. The ARRL short little paper log, those are my favorite. They just work great. So if I'm looking at longer distance, 5+ days, and this is a picture of my setup, this is what I'm bringing. So I have QRP Labs QMX, I have my Pac-10, the RG316 coax, which is in this picture here, my throw line, a USB-C cable, 10-length cell battery, and my Morse key. So the USB-C cable is because with this radio, or any radio that can do digital forms, you can now use your phone to do FT8, if you were not aware of that. There is a way with a single USB cable, if there's a sound card built into the radio, to do FT8. So if I'm going to activate in the woods and I can't have single sideband as an option, this is, at least I have digital and CW as a backup with this setup here. Can't remember the name of the app. I think it's just FT8 on Android. Yeah, but it works well. It's not super great, but it's enough to get you activated, which is the whole point. So how would you take the path into the woods? What's your steps here? So I'll kind of walk you through my process. This is very generic, but sometimes it's just good to hear it. Set a goal. What does that look like? Are you going to hike the Appalachian Trail, or are you going to go hike your park down the street? Both are valid and both are fine. It could just be that you're looking for something. It could be that you want to go see what this park looks like. It could be that you want to go see this cliff face. Anything that you want to do could be your goal. Could be something to help become a little more healthy, or just simply the challenge of it. Once you have that goal in mind, develop your plan. Establish milestones, incorporate the plan into your daily routine. This is what I can't stress enough. Make sure it's part of your, at least thinking about it every day, and set those milestones that you can work towards it. Because hiking the Appalachian Trail's up here, and I'm hiking my park down here, and I have to know what the steps are to get up to that higher goal. So it could be hiking 50 miles a month, it could be hiking every trail in any given park, or it could just simply be going outside and optimizing my QRP setup. What does that look like? And then make it a habit. So doing it a little bit every day, you can learn so much. And if any of us have taken the ham radio test, which I think a lot of us have, I think we know that working on it every day is the way to learn, right? You got to make it a habit. So practice, 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 and of course maintain your enthusiasm. If it starts to become a job, if it starts to become not fun, you need to step back. Because the worst thing is a gumption trap, where the enthusiasm is gone, and I just don't want to do this anymore. It's going to kill all of your momentum. So be patient with yourself and work towards it. And once you've done all those things you can achieve, celebrate the wins, upgrade with new milestones, because it's not over. You did one thing, what's the new goal? This is cyclical, right? Keep working towards it, and then always maintain your enthusiasm. So for myself, I have goals for 2025. This was the big snow that we had a couple weeks ago. I went out and hiked a couple miles into a state park, which is near me, and set up and did Parks on the Air because the government was shut down, so I had a day off, and I got out there and did it, but it was a lot of fun. So for me, activating 5 new states at least, completing at least one tri-state POTA. We've already done one. A couple weeks ago, we went out to West Virginia, Pennsylvania, and Maryland. We did those 3 states in one day. It's a lot of fun. stayed in West Virginia, and then just drove into each state at the tri-state area and activated a park. So we're looking at Minnesota, North Dakota, or South Dakota, or Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, as those 2 tri-state areas are what we're looking at next. Activate 5 new soda sites. So somebody asked me when I came in what soda I do in Indiana. Well, the 2 that are an option, because one's on private land. We only have 3 peaks in Indiana that are soda eligible. But down in Kentucky, there's a bunch, and it's not really that far of a drive, so I'm making that a goal as well. I want to hunt 50 new parks on the air using CW. I've got 15 as of today, so we're on the way. I need, 35 more. Participate in Winter Field Day, that's already done, and Field Day for 2025. Activate 50 new parks, increase my CW proficiency, and then activate POTA using a digital mode. Also already done. I did FT8 down in Kentucky a couple weeks ago. So having that laid out, this is, it may seem generic but basic, but setting that goal helps me work towards it a little bit every day. And in my opinion, outdoor radio is something for everyone. It's doable. We have accessible areas in most state parks. You could be in the parking lot in your vehicle and still do parks on the air. There's a lot of options out there. So make sure to add it to your favorite outdoor hobby, because it can be done. I'm happy to answer any questions. Yes, sir.
So I got 2.
Sure.
One was, you said you cache water.
Yes.
Physically, how does that work?
Excellent. So caching water, how does that work? So water cache, basically, if a trail is, whether it's a circle or not, or it's a line, I always prefer the circle because I can park and then get back to my truck. But it's a line, so I went and parked my truck at the end where I would finish, and my wife lovingly drove me down to the other part at like 5 in the morning for me to start. On the way down there, I stopped at 2 points where the road intersected with the trail. Jumped out, put water, and I covered it with as much dirt and leaves as I could because I knew it was going to freeze. It was December, which it did, but I carried it with me as an ice block until it thawed and got my water. So as I get to these sites along the trail, like I know where they're at because I've marked them on my map, and I have to ration my water till I get there, right? So you have to, how much am I going to use for my coffee in the morning? That's going to dehydrate me, so should I even have coffee? And then once I get there, I can refill, and I always put the water or the water jug on my backpack so I don't leave trash behind, right?
And then the second question was, so what percentage of your weight is the ham radio?
That's a good question. So it depends on the distance. So for 2 to 5 days, it's about 5 pounds. So that's with the Zyju, with the antenna, and that's my lightest setup. I can add more if I want to bring the mass.
You're carrying what, 35 you said?
I've got it down to, that would be about 25 to 30 with that
So
setup.
about 20%.
Yeah. But on anything that I would consider over 5 days, I'm bringing the QRP, the battery, my coax, and my antenna, and maybe the USB-C cable. It's under 2 pounds. Yeah.
One question, you still have a website, or do you just have a website or something? Will you talk about your backpack?
I have a YouTube channel, yeah.
Okay, that's what you did. The other thing is, I did backpacking. One thing I ran to, like New Mexico, we went up on the mountain peaks. Below us, okay, we're up at 10,000 feet, raining the whole damn time I was there. So we real discouraged. Spent 2 days waiting for it to go off, never did, so we dropped down. The car department's still not.
Yeah.
Kind of screws up the whole weekend.
Well,
It's not much
water.
Yeah, it's not much fun in a tent watching water flow under your tent. I'll get into that part.
That's true. I know a lot of people have switched over to hammock camping for that reason. It's a little bit heavier than tents are now. Like my entire sleep system is under 2 pounds. It's crazy how light some of these things have become. But a hammock, it gets you up off the ground. So even if it does rain, you might be able to avoid some of that. But if there's lightning and stuff, of course, you don't necessarily want to set up an antenna right in the middle of that. Yeah, that's fair. Yes, sir.
Could you comment on the G90 versus the QMX?
Sure. So the G90 is more versatile. It does single sideband digital and CW. So it's my only portable single sideband option. I have a Yaesu 710, which are great for like car POTA, but I don't want to put that in the backpack and carry it around. But the Zyju, it's got a built-in tuner, and it's up to 20 watts, the version that I have. So it's not technically a QRP, but I almost always run it at 10 anyway. And then the QMX is digital and CW, but it's got a built-in sound card, but no built-in tuner. So you need a resonant tuner or a resident antenna or pocket tuner.
Which one do you use the most?
Right now I use the G90 the most, mainly because I don't have a chance to do 5-day plus hikes where I would only bring the QMX as often as I would like. But we use it all the time when we're even carpoting. Like it's kind of my go-to. It's a great little radio. Any other questions?
Do you use solar, or is that unnecessary?
Solar, my goal up to this point was the Appalachian Trail. Solar's not really feasible on that. They call the Appalachian Trail the green tunnel for a reason. You're pretty much away from the sun all the time. It's out, but not enough to charge anything. Solar is a great option. I don't have a panel that would provide enough electricity to be able to run what I want to run, but I know that they exist. I don't know how much they weigh, but I think they're getting to the point where it is completely viable. But I think you're reliant on the sun there, right? So I like to not have to. I want as much in my control as I can do. But good question. Yes.
You said you use a LiPo battery, I'm assuming, what did you find as far as the amp hour works for, I mean, how much do you want the radio when you're out hiking?
Sure.
It's obvious you like the hike, you're not just there to use the radio, but
Right.
you spend some time on it too. How do you strike that balance between capacity and, size? They'll weigh a lot more, but there's a size factor there.
Excellent. Yeah. So, how much am I using the radio? How much am I hiking? So, there's a saying that I'm hiking to camp or I'm camping to hike, right? So, if I'm going out to camp, I might bring all the luxury stuff, and I'm not hiking that far. If I'm camping to hike, I'm only sleeping to continue the hike the next day, right? It's less of a priority. So, in this case, I would say I am radioing to hike as well in this instance. I want to activate the parks that I'm going through, and if you look at some of my YouTube videos, one of my favorite things to do is pick a trail that goes through 3 parks, so 3 POTA sites. And I like to get to it and set up in 10 minutes, get it, I always get 20 contacts or so, and I try to never leave during a pile up, so bear with me there. I always try to finish the pile up, pack up, move on to the next site. So for me, I've found that the 6 amp hour by ONL is perfect, and I've never had it die on the G90. Now, like I said, I keep it at 10 watts, but even at 20, I think you can get a whole day out of it. So at least a couple hours, because I'm not activating for usually more than an hour at a time when I'm doing these hikes. Absolutely, and even to motorcycles. I do a lot of motorcycle trips, and learning the skill from any of these really does apply to others. And because you learn to do without, and you learn to make what you have last the longest, right, and do the most work for you. Thank you. Anything else? All right, I have some cards I'll leave up here, but this is just a link to my YouTube channel. If you want to check it out, feel free. It's just something fun that I do. I'm not monetized or anything, but it's a lot of fun. Thank you for having me.